Hello YouTube, it's Hauntown here, and today we're diving back into the nostalgically horrifying world of survival horror games inspired by two little-known series in the genre called Resident Evil and Silent Hill. Given the massive view count my previous video on this topic managed to amass, I figured, you know what, let's ride this wave of infinite success by making a second video on this topic and capitalizing on the previous video's momentum. Smart. Or delusional, it could be either of the two. I was never really that good at math, to be honest. Anyway, it is time, ghouls and gals. Without further ado, I present to you 12 upcoming survival horror games inspired by the leviathans that are Resident Evil and Silent Hill. Did you ever wonder what it would be like to have a badass Duke Nukem type dude be thrown into a brutal survival horror experience? Well, wonder no more, because the Lacerator is here to give you the answer. Kinda. Experience life through the eyes of Max, the man who loves sex. Yeah, now you know the vibe this game is going for. Anyway, it's just another day full of hot women for Max. But then something happens and he ends up inside a horrific dungeon without pants, or as I like to call it, just another Wednesday. But Max will have none of this, and he immediately goes around beating the crap out of things in order to find his way out. Now, I'll admit I did not expect to like the Lacerator when I first started it. I guess I felt like the grindhouse feel wasn't really working for me. I didn't really find Max to be that appealing of a character, and for some reason I found the game to be a bit shallow. Then, about 4 minutes into the demo, this happened. Holy shit, did I just get my arm cut off? Am I dead? No? You mean I'll keep playing with one arm? Damn! So following this ordeal, I quickly realized that the Lacerator has more depth than I gave it credit for. Turns out there are certain choices you might make that can have an impact not only on your combat condition, but also on your exploration capabilities. As an example, during my first demo playthrough and after I lost my arm, I discovered certain hints about the trap that severed it and the fact that I could actually have disabled it first to keep my extremity, which would have been helpful given I eventually found a door that needed both my hands to be opened. I eventually managed to finish the demo unarmed, in the game, not in real life, but not before getting my ass kicked by this psychopath, the titular Lacerator, who just dropped me on my ass and then left, just to add insult to injury. With my renewed knowledge, I went back inside the game and this time disabled the trap before taking the gun, thus keeping my arm, which I then used alongside my other arm to open the aforementioned door, and behind it I found a box which I opened with a previously discovered code and was rewarded with an awesome boomstick, that I then used to decimate this asshole. And just like that, I was in love with the Lacerator. The game, not this bikini-wearing bastard. From what I've seen in the title's trailer, the setting will be packed with traps that may cause you to lose a limb, which will then influence the way you move and interact with the environment, which is awesome. And the fact that the story will allow you to pursue different branching paths and feature different endings just makes this a paradise, or hell, of replayability. I should also mention that the Lacerator supports both fixed and over-the-shoulder camera angles, but I obviously went for a fixed angle for maximum nostalgia. If you love unpredictability and brutality in your survival horror games, the Lacerator is a must to keep on your radar. My best guess for our second game here was that its developer had a look at the aforementioned The Lacerator and thought, you know what, let's do a complete 180 on the over-the-top, grimy, gritty and irreverent style of that one and create a game that is the embodiment of a 9-to-5 job, complete with minimalistic art style and a protagonist that looks like he was dropped in there straight from his office cubicle. And thus, The King in the Shades was born. Now, this is not meant as a jab at the creator of the game, but it is kind of actually how I felt while playing this. The King in the Shades throws you straight into the inaction as you wake up in the middle of a forest without a single word of introduction or guidance of any sort, which under normal circumstances I don't really mind, but here things felt kind of bland, I guess? It doesn't help that the character's face is blank, thus kind of keeping you from being able to identify with him since he gives the impression of a walking mannequin, but my main issue here is how underwhelming and at the same time brutally difficult everything is. For starters, the game is not good at giving you hints in certain situations where you really need them. The immediate thing that comes to mind is the following. Soon after I entered an isolated house in the forest, I came across a note on the kitchen fridge that clearly had a combination for me to open something. Further investigation revealed a safe in an office, which my mind immediately connected to the note. As I approached the safe to open it, the game kept flashing this symbol at me, which I eventually realized was the warning that my inventory is full, and the character wanted to first get the hint photo of the safe, which hinted at the kitchen which I had already visited, before it would allow me to open the safe. Aside from the fact that I discovered the symbol's meaning by accident, I couldn't help but wonder, 1. Why would you need to add that photo there since the limited exploration would eventually force players to make the safe note connection, and 2. Okay, let's keep the photo there, but why do I need to first take it before opening the safe? Another issue was that the game didn't give you any indicator when you would pick items up, and you instead had to open your inventory to see if there's anything new there. I feel like a brief text warning would be good here in case you accidentally take something without noticing. Finally, following the first appearance of the game's enemies, my life became a living hell. Moving aside the fact that the place got swarmed by them, thus making exploration a hectic chore, these guys felt like zombies on steroids, being clearly faster and stronger than you, which would be fine if it wasn't like 10 of them within spitting distance of you at all times, with your ammo clearly not sufficient to take them out, and if you got 1 or 2 of them on your ass, you're grass. And we're talking about the normal difficulty here, which is described as appropriate for people unfamiliar with this type of games. I can't even begin to imagine what fresh hell the hardest difficulty will wrought upon the unsuspecting masses. But perhaps the biggest issue here is that the game failed to build any sort of interest in its happenings and gave off a weird sense of banality, with the combination of all of the above being so detrimental that I simply didn't bother to finish the demo. I'd still recommend having a look at The King in the Shades because I do feel it has something to offer to the genre, but given its current difficulty state, I'll personally keep my distance, though I'll probably maintain it in my sights for the future if the challenge becomes more balanced. Big corporations, man, they just ruin everything, am I right? I mean, Umbrella, Shinra, Wayland-Yutani, Disney, Electronic Arts. It just feels like all of them are hell-bent on screwing up the world, and now there's a new one called Eden coming to join the list, courtesy of a creepy little game titled Scarlet Lake. The story follows Detective Ben Murphy, who decides to visit the government-controlled isolated town of Scarlet Lake after his wife sends him a message to come find her. Unfortunately for him, things escalate quickly once he reaches the town gate when him and his guide are stopped by 2 employees of Eden, the aforementioned company who's probably been doing some bad stuff to the townsfolk since the guards immediately blast your guide's head off. However, just as they're about to take Ben down, one of them is pulled into the forest by an unseen creature, giving our detective a chance to disarm and kill the other one, and just like that, his nightmare begins. I have to say that the game's visual style and music are spot on in delivering an incredibly unsettling ambience that harkens back to the classics of the 90s. From the moody color palette to the creepy tunes that accompany you, it really feels like danger can jump out from every corner, which they actually do. I mean, Jesus Christ, where did that thing come from, man? Speaking about the classics, you can expect several logical puzzles here, either simple item-based ones or some that need a bit more observation to complete, which is awesome. Another thing I loved here is the fact that you can actually upgrade your weapons by gathering scrap and then visiting some workbenches you can find. And there will also be a merchant in the full game with whom you'll be able to banter, hence some money I found during the demo. There's even a basic map overview to keep track of your surroundings, which is always a plus. The 4 things that definitely need some work here are the following. First, combat feels a bit off, with the character sometimes not aiming exactly where I thought he would based on my use of the analog stick, which can be a problem when facing numerous enemies at once. Second, the game has this weird mechanic where if an enemy comes close enough, you can no longer aim your gun at them, which I'm guessing is an attempt at realism since you can't extend your hands forward and first need to shove the creatures back and create some space, which I found incredibly annoying since you could easily get cornered, and at times I felt like the shoving motion was a bit unresponsive, which resulted in my demise, and that leads me to issue number 3, saving and checkpoints. For the life of me, I still have no clue how and when the game saves, which resulted in some frustrating redoing of a section twice after I bit the dust, so it would be great for this to be clarified a bit during the first minutes of gameplay. Finally, Finally, some fine-tuning needs to happen with environmental collision, since Ben tends to abruptly stop walking or running when he moves against something even in the slightest angle, which led to some annoying stop-and-go situations. If these 4 things get addressed, we're talking about a little gem of a horror game right here. I still loved it and will be playing it day 1, it would just be fantastic if the game is in top-notch condition when that happens. All in all, go check out Scarlet Lake immediately and give it a wish list while you're at it. I have a feeling it will be worth your time. Now, for this game, I'm mostly going to utilize its trailer since, to be honest, I wasn't able to play the demo due to horrendously bad optimization issues. Ward is about Road to Hollow Hills, and just to give you an idea, this is me trying to play the game with everything set on low, aside from textures which are on medium, since if I take them on low, the game looks like this. I was really bummed since, as far as the trailer and game description goes, this looks like a solid experience, but definitely one I didn't get to experience. The story follows John, a guy that decides to venture into the enigmatic world of Hollow Hills in search of his missing sister, a place that blurs the line between reality and nightmare. The game boasts a solid combat system that relies on stamina, giving it a Souls-like air as you have to be very careful when timing your attacks if you don't want to end up open to a world of hurt. There will be several puzzles across its setting, which will grant you access to secrets and new areas if you manage to solve them, and you'll also get some sort of character customization system to tailor your approach to combat. I really wish I could have gone hands-on with this one, but I'd rather play Pac-Man than go through the demo like this. In any case, do give Road to Hollow Hills a try if it speaks to you. If your playthrough's performance fares better than mine, there might be some fun to be had here. Do you enjoy a good dose of puzzles with your survival horror games? Then you're gonna love Greek Tragedy, a survival horror title that is weird, but in a fun way. The game starts in the most confusing way possible by having you playing as an anthropomorphic female sheep that is apparently on the run from something. After a bit of puzzle solving and some genuinely creepy situations, it turns out the something after her is a wolf that initially looks like he wants to kill her but ends up being in love with her. At this point I was about to say screw this and check out, but turns out this whole intro was a fictional story being written by the actual protagonist, Amy, who is writing it from her dorm room in southern Michigan University. After receiving an odd email from a friend of hers asking her to meet with him somewhere on campus, the game starts and we're off to the races. Greek Tragedy is incredibly puzzle focused, which I found thoroughly enjoyable, since all puzzles were logical and respected your intelligence, meaning that there was not much hand-holding involved. What I loved about this demo was that the element of making choices is introduced early on, which can lead to different outcomes. For example, there's an instance where I have to call campus security in order to have them unlock a door for me. Once I did that by identifying myself in my dorm room as requested, the person I was talking to turned malicious and sent some cult-like figures after me, which I failed to escape. However, after some sort of QuickTime event situation, I got a second chance to play this right, and this time I gave the name and room number of another girl, which prompted the phone guy to unlock the door for me. I'm really curious to see how choices like that one will influence a complete playthrough. The two things that really rubbed me the wrong way here were that 1, there is some kind of issue with the running system and my character kept hiccuping in and out of walking and running, which was super annoying, and 2, when I was searching through my room computer and selected the option to ask the community for help out of curiosity, which is supposed to take you to the game's Discord server, my whole PC froze, which truly pissed me off. Even with these two issues, I still enjoyed my time with Greek Tragedy, so do give it a go and see if it's up your alley. Next on our list, we have Resident Evil Village. What? What do you mean that's the wrong name? Oh yeah, that's right, I mean to say Resident Evil 7. What do you mean that's not the name either? Look at the game's cover, man. Oh, Ebola Village, right, yeah, my bad. I guess the Resident Evil 7 logo art and the addition of the word village kind of threw me off. Anyway, so Ebola Village is the 4th entry in the Ebola series, a collection of games I had no idea existed until a few days ago, with the previous games having ranged from a negative to somewhat positive reception. Given the feedback I had seen from other players, I honestly didn't expect anything going into this game. So imagine my surprise when I discovered that it was actually okay-ish, I guess? As far as the story goes, you take on the role of Maria, an irreverent Russian chick that decides to visit her mother's village to check up on her, following an Ebola outbreak that has been dominating the news. Oh, so that's where the village part of the title comes into play, okay. In any case, not a minute after you get there, a clearly infected villager attacks you and the shit hits the fan. The game's visuals are solid and gunplay is serviceable, though I have to say that whether I was shooting with the pistol or the shotgun, I didn't observe any difference since the shotgun was weak as shit. Given that the game is Russian, I have to say I was impressed by the level of English used here, which was far from perfect but very much understandable. What I was not impressed by was the protagonist's choice of wardrobe. She arrives in the village fully dressed, leather coat and all, and once her clothes get torn during her first scuffle and she scavenges some new attire from a nearby house, this is what she ends up with? Seriously, dude? It's balls freezing cold outside and instead of dressing up, you decide to Lara Croft this shit? Also, the initial cutscene shows her without a coat, but she clearly wears one during first-person view, so slight inconsistency there, my guy. On a completely separate note, this headshot effect on enemies is hilarious. In any case, even though the demo was super short, I ended up enjoying Ebola Village more than I thought I would. It's nothing to write home about, but could end up being a bit of fun for a few hours, so make of that what you will. I don't have a lot to say about this next one, called Split Apart, since it didn't feel like it had much going for it, to be honest. You're immediately thrown into the story as a woman that has just woken up in a bathtub, and you realize that you are trapped in what I assume is an apartment building by some unknown person that keeps leaving malicious hints for you in the form of brief notes. I'll admit the atmosphere was somewhat tense, and I did like the path the story is probably going to go toward, but the main issue here is that gameplay is very simple, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but simplicity can also end up on the bland side of things. There's a complete lack of inventory since the character immediately uses whatever items she deems necessary given each situation, and there's not much going on in the overall environmental variety, especially when it comes to enemies who all look like burglars pretending to be zombies. Still, I thought the ambience was quite cool and really wanted to see the demo to its end, but first, I got completely stuck and didn't know what to do next, and two, as I was exploring, I clipped through a wall and couldn't get out, at which point my playthrough reached an untimely end. Surprisingly, I'm still curious about Split Apart, so I'll wait for a full release and revisit it then, since the story intrigues me. Try it out, who knows, it might do it for you. I've always been a proponent of the idea that horror is most effective when protagonists have very limited resources to defend themselves against whatever threat wants them dead, and I'll be damned if Subversive Memories doesn't take that mentality to heart. Subversive Memories adopts a minimalistic approach to storytelling by dropping you straight into the game without a single word of premise, and leaves you to your own devices. The narrative takes place sometime during the 70s and involves the real-life military dictatorship of a heavily fictionalized Brazil. You are an unnamed woman that awakens inside the military base and proceeds to investigate it only to find the place stalked by weird shadow creatures whose only weakness is light. Lucky for you, you do find a flashlight early on in the game, which you can use to stun them, but for some reason my controller refused to follow my commands in relation to this and I had to switch to the mouse if I wanted to attack, so I simply spent most of my time running away from enemies. There were strong Silent Hill vibes across my playthrough given the foreboding atmosphere and vague nature of the monsters, with Resident Evil coming into play for inventory management and the boatload of documents filling in the blanks of the story, though I'd say the Silent Hill elements prevailed as this feels like it's going to be a deeply psychological experience. Subversive Memories intrigued me enough to warrant a recommendation, though I'd like the control issue to be fixed since I prefer playing these games with a controller instead of mouse and keyboard. Don't you hate the subway? The way it is always empty and infected by cosmic horrors and full of creepy mannequins and you need to solve puzzles to get out? What do you mean that's not what the subway is like? Then what about Post-Trauma, a game about an old Japanese guy named Roman who's trapped in a subway full of cosmic horrors and creepy mannequins and puzzles? Oh, so that's not a subway simulator but a survival horror game inspired by Silent Hill, got it. I don't really use the subway, so I mostly know about it from horror movies and horror games. Anyway, Post-Trauma was a very solid horror experience that kept giving me Silent Hill 3 PTSD with its fleshy abominations and harder than average conundrums. I actually immediately got stuck in its first brain teaser straight from the get-go, so that really set the tone of making me feel like a moron early on. All jokes aside, Post-Trauma looks awesome, and even though some of its puzzles gave me a run for my money, they proved to be ingenious in their solutions, so that's on me. The demo was fairly short, but still enough to give me a taste of its realistic atmosphere, which was complemented by some awesome music clearly inspired by Akira Yamaoka, which means it was sublime. I also enjoyed its combat, especially the fact that you could backstep to avoid getting hit, which allowed for more control over my altercations. If you're looking for the next game to fill the Silent Hill void in your life, Post-Trauma is definitely a worthy contender, so check it out. It's shaping up to become something special. Ever since I played Dead Space back in the day, I developed a soft spot for science fiction survival horror games, which is why I was very happy to come across Regeneration. The story transpires in a post-Soviet country that has been infested by an alien life form that consumes and assimilates everything on its path. You are thrust into the role of an unlucky scientist who is sent to investigate this entity and figure out a way to stop it, but, as expected, things end up not going smoothly and our hero finds himself knee-deep in mutated horrors. Even though the demo was short, I found the atmosphere of Regeneration to be quite gripping, especially given the fact that it seems like there's an emphasis on exploration since you're weak and suck at combat, at least as far as these initial impressions are concerned, which does make sense considering that you're a scientist. Instead, your strength lies in investigation and analysis using your high-tech tools, which allow you to gain insights into your enemies and exploit their weaknesses. Whether by stealth, creative thinking, or environmental manipulation, you'll have to adapt to your foes if you wish to escape this nightmare alive. There's also a crafting system involved here, though I didn't get a chance to experience it during the demo. My only gripe is that the game is very demanding in terms of PC resources, and there were certain instances where my FPS tanked because of that. Overall, if you like science fiction survival horror games, do give Regeneration a look. There's something kind of relaxing about being a waiter at a remote diner during the night. There aren't that many customers, though some of them can be creepers. You have a bit of time to make small talk with your colleagues, you can chill as you're cleaning the place at the end of your shift, and oh god, what was that? It's fine, just a hallucination, everything's fine. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yes, cleaning up the place and maybe give some last-minute coffee to a late customer. Oh my god, what is wrong with her face? There's cockroaches coming out of her face. Damn, okay, it's fine. I'm just a bit rattled. There was also this guy who came in before and said he lost his sister and that she was last seen here. You know what? I should probably investigate the diner because my boss has been acting suspiciously about the basement. I'll ask my friend here to come with me as well. I'm sure nothing will go wrong down there. Well, shit. I should probably clarify that this wasn't a day in my job, but rather in the job of Elena, a young waitress and the protagonist of Larking Danger, who's about to have the worst night of her life. Larking Danger did a great job of easing me into its horrors by progressively making things uncomfortable as my shift carried on, before hitting me with a few jump scares to properly set the tone for what comes next. The most standout aspect of this game is probably the fact that you can play the whole thing in split-screen co-op with a friend, which should be a fun experience. Other than that, the demo was interesting and offered pretty much what you would expect from a survival horror game inspired by the classics, such as puzzle solving, inventory management, and stressful zombie fights. Gunplay did feel a bit sluggish for some reason, but that could probably be fixed by adjusting sensitivity. Lurking Danger has my attention. I was thoroughly entertained by the way it set up its premise, and I'll probably give it a go once it's out. As per usual, I left the best for last. Do you ever miss the feeling you got the first time you played Resident Evil 1? The gradual creeping dread of the unknown, the constant sense of oppressive fear, the first zombie meeting, the cheesy voice acting? Well, get ready to relive this experience because Flesh Made Fear is not only the most heavy metal album cover title ever, but also one of the best retro survival horror games I've had the pleasure of playing. Flesh Made Fear is being created by a developer that's very near and dear to my heart, namely Tainted Pact, the twisted minds behind beloved horror classics like Terror at Oakhart and Massacre at the Mirage, and if there's one thing these people know how to do, that is nostalgic horror brilliance. Flesh Made Fear has you play as either Jack Bones Richards or Natalie Nix Lewis, two members of the Reaper Intervention Platoon or RIP Squad, named as such since their sole directive is to find and terminate a depraved scientist called Victor Reaper, who used to lead a project with the aim of controlling the human mind only to eventually go insane and disappear along with all of his project notes and material. Finally traced down to the isolated town of Rotwood after a series of disappearances there, the RIP team is sent to investigate and hopefully put an end to his reign of terror. I honestly loved every single second of my experience here, from the cheesy banter among team members to the awesome sense of perpetual unease as you moved through the misty backwoods of Rotwood, all the way to the respite offered by the save rooms and the adrenaline of your first meeting with the game's abominations. Flesh Made Fear hit all of the correct nostalgia notes necessary to take me back to my childhood. Everything here screams Resident Evil: the inventory management system, the numerous puzzles you have to solve in order to progress, the fixed camera angles, the tank controls, it's just awesome. If there's one thing that miffed me was that there was a lot of screen tearing in certain places even though I had VSync activated, so I'm hoping this gets fixed by the time of the game's release. If you love retro survival horror games, don't you dare sleep on Flesh Made Fear. This one's going to be awesome. And thus concludes our creepy journey through the exciting world of survival horror games that took just a little bit of inspiration from Resident Evil and Silent Hill, ghouls and gals. Did any of these games catch your eye? Do let me know in the comments below and feel free to subscribe for more spooky content. Also, if you enjoyed this video, have a look at the previous one as well, right here. Please watch it. They have my family.